All right, so I just got done recording the Argent Defender video, and I'm going to record the gearing video that I talked about recording the other one. But first, I'm going to take a drink of water because I'm a dumbass, apparently. Yeah. Okay. So, where are we at with the Paladins? Well, if you watch the previous video right before this one, you'll hear me talking about how, actually showcasing the Paladin, so I definitely go watch that. Where we're at with Paladin is Holy Shock is still absolutely terrifying, and it's kind of more terrifying, to believe it or not, if you're using the healing gear sets and what else is there? If you're using the healing gear sets and healing items like healing shields and healing weapons and lots of MP5 gear, and you're just refusing to die. You're just absolutely saying, no, fuck you, we're not going to die. Then, once your opponent has worn out on their resources and both of you have entered sustain mode, then you can either drop combat and swap gear into more offensive gear on your Holy Shock Paladin, or you can just swap out your weapons and so forth and so on, or whatever little bits of gear you need, and you end up getting quite high up there in spell power for the purposes of killing a target. I talk about that in the previous video. We showcased some gameplay in the previous video. Definitely go check that out. But what we're going to be talking about now is what it looks like to try to find your gear optimizations. So I've gotten a lot of questions about people asking about, like, stat priorities and how things work and so forth and so on. And I've made videos in the past literally about the subject of gearing breakpoints, how to find your gearing breakpoints, what your stat prioritizations are, what you should be thinking about, blah, 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 blah. But I've never made a video that has all that information concentrated in one place. So we're going to do that right now. We're going to do that. Right now, and we're going to do that for TBC, because TBC has a different meta than Classic World of Warcraft. So, to begin with, your stat prioritization as a paladin in TBC or Classic World of Warcraft is as follows. 1. Don't die. So whatever the hell you have to do to be alive and not dead, that is your number one fucking priority, and usually that'll almost always come in the form of parentheses means HP stupid. It literally means have enough HP that you're alive and you're dead, especially in Classic World of Warcraft. Okay, I'm going to turn off the sound. Especially in Classic World of Warcraft. Make sure I'm recording. Yeah, we're still recording. 2 is, can you catch it? Make sure you can catch people, because if you can't catch people, no amount of DPS in the world is going to matter. And on top of that, if you're not able to catch people, you're usually also not able to stop them from, like, eating and drinking and bandaging and all that crap. Which means that trying to do a sustained playstyle, it's a massive negative to your DPS if you cannot sit on top of your target, if that makes any sense. You can't win a sustained battle, and they're much harder to burst because they just have more healing and more mana and more resources. It's just bad. Definitely catch it. Catching it. Alright, so the third stat priority, these aren't really stat priorities, these are like gearing priorities. Paladins, in my opinion, as far as PvP is concerned, do not have gear priorities. And the reason for this primarily is because in Classic World of Warcraft and in TBC, we really struggle to catch motherfuckers. Right? We struggle to have time on target with people in order to beat the shit out of them. If in other expansions, we stop struggling to catch people, which means we have long periods of time. Okay, so in other expansions, the meta stops being a bursting meta, which means that we don't struggle with, number one, we don't have issues with don't die anymore. They give us talents and abilities like long arm of the law, in order to actually catch and stay on top of people for long periods of time. So we actually have time on target. And only once you get time on target does it really matter what your stat prioritization is for the purposes of maximizing your DPS. So in Classic World of Warcraft and in TBC, the concept of stat prioritization for the purposes of maximizing your DPS because you have time on target doesn't really exist, because first we need to get to a point where we actually have fucking time on target, if that makes any sense. In order to do that, we need enough HP not to die, so we can actually make it to the target. We need to make it to the target with enough HP. Then on top of that, we actually need to make it to the fucking target, which is prioritization number 2. And then obviously number 3 is can you kill it? So only now does our DPS actually matter. Now, the other thing I brought up in previous videos on this subject is that you can have any 2 of these things, literally infinite any 2 of these things, and you will suck a dick as a paladin. Okay? Like, let's say we have infinite hit points, we absolutely cannot die, and we can catch the shit out of things, but we have no DPS. Well, we're borderline useless. Let's say we have infinite DPS and we have infinite hit points, but we can't catch anything. Again, borderline useless. That's literally an armed warrior's life in PvP against like a frost mage or against a druid, for example, in Classic World of Warcraft. They have metric shit tons of DPS. They totally can't fucking die, but god damn can they not catch a motherfucker. What's the last one? It's don't die and we can, let's see, it's don't die and catch it. We did that one already. Don't have any DPS. Let's say we have infinite DPS and we can catch the shit out of things, but we got like no HP. People just sneeze on us and we fucking die, right? So you need all 3 of these things simultaneously and preferably in these 3 orders. And the reason why this prioritization exists in this order is as follows. Once we have enough HP so that we're not really dying anymore, and that HP comes in the form, of course, of like, you know, resistances, your ability to heal yourself. What's your MP5 look like? Did you have enough HP and healing capability to enter a sustain game? Because if we enter a sustain game, then we don't need as much HP. Things like obsidian breastplate and a bunch of other weird little items. If you're so tanky that you can't die anymore to your opponent, you suddenly have the gearing flexibility to start stripping out pieces of gear. It's like, oh, I don't need to wear these boots anymore. I can use goblin rocket boots. And I can use goblin rocket boots to solve the problem of, can I catch it? I don't have to use PvP trinket anymore. I don't have to use this other HP trinket anymore. I can start using catch you trinkets like Gnomish Netomatic or Nifty Stopwatch or reflectors, because good reflectors can also be used offensively and defensively. That's both a heal for you and damage to your opponent kind of a thing. Or you can start using the trinkets slots to start fixing the can you kill it issues. Other things that solve themselves when you have tons of hit points is suddenly you do not need to use a healing potion anymore or a mana potion anymore. You can start using swiftness potions, right? So now we're solving the can you catch it issue. Well, if I have enough HP to solve the can I catch it issue via the use of, say, goblin rocket boots and swiftness potions, the next thing I know, my trinkets are suddenly available for things like burst DPS or just raw DPS. Or I'm so tanky in my gear, I can start switching out pieces of gear for more DPS. So everything kind of starts with having enough HP, and once you get enough HP, you can start pulling back on the durability in order to achieve things like catching it and then subsequently killing it, right? That kind of tends to how that works. From a gearing perspective, right? Like, let's say you're fresh into classic TBC. You have no fucking idea what gear you should be wearing. You're trying to figure out what gear you should be wearing. Palytime helped me out to tell me what kind of gear I should be wearing. Well, that's not the first questions we need to be answering as Paladin players. The first questions we need to be answering as Paladin players is, what the fuck does the meta look like? Like, what are the stats and the figures? What are the raw numbers? What's the raw information? Blah, 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 blah. This is Mechatecha stuff. Fuck off. I'm making a video game. This is the spell, like literally a video game for Steam, should be coming out in like a year. This is just the some of the spell casting crap. Where is TBC stats and figures? There we go. Yeah, is this right? No, this is Resto Druid healing. This is their dodge percentages. This is all the stuff I show in all the other videos, right? I want TBC stats and figures. How much damage do people do? What's the mana cost of it? What's the cast time? What's the burst look like? What abilities do they have? Blah, blah, blah. What are the talents and so forth and so on. Only once we've nailed down what talent builds are viable in the meta that we exist in, with the gear that we exist in. Pull it up just so you guys can see I do my fucking homework. Prove to people that I do my homework. La 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 la. Once we see what our gearing options are, once we see what the meta looks like, once we see what talent builds are viable, once we see what the ratios are, blah 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 blah. Once we get all this fucking information, only then can we ask ourselves, okay, basically have to ask yourself, am I in the best spec? Am I using the best tactics? And then only then does it become, am I using the best gear, if that makes any sense, right? How we figure out whether or not we're using the best gear, there was an old video I did, I'm not on VPN right now, so I can't pull it up, but it talks about like stat prioritizations and stuff like that. The title card of the video, if you're looking for it, it's got like two bars, kind of a thing, showing one's like for DPS and one's like durability, and we're adjusting the bars. And this is literally what I'm about to talk about right now. So, how to optimize your gear for PvP. Well, first off, you need to know the spec and the meta and so forth and so on. So, option one is go as durable as you can. Be unkillable. Like literally be unkillable in your durability. And then ... This means leads to, then pull back in favor of catch and kill. So literally, this is option number one, and you have to do this. So this is where I'm at right now in the gearing process. I've identified what the meta is. I've identified what the gearing looks like. I've identified what all the spells and stuff is in the game. I've identified what the best paladin specs are based upon blah 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 blah. And so now I'm trying to figure out where my gearing optimizations are. And the first place I'm going to look for is, and you just saw it in the previous video, I'm going to make myself as unkillable as possible. I'm going to have as much mana as possible. I'm going to play the sustain game as possible. I'm going to see if I can how many fights I can win just by being an unkillable turd. Then I'm going to figure out how much of that gear I can start stripping off of myself and still be an unkillable turd. Let me pause the video and actually find that video online real fast. Okay, we successfully found it. So it turns out it's the caster supplemental video I made a very long time ago. What the hell's the name of this? Paladin vs. Druid, Warrior, and Caster Supplemental. I really need to make a new video on this. Let me take a drink of water real fast. Basically what it points out is that following graph represented Paladin, 2 pieces of DPS gear, yeah. So there's basically like, wow, okay, take your time to load, Jesus Christ. God damn. Basically, it talks about like breakpoints in your gearing. So it's kind of like, there's different breakpoints where it's like, let me try to explain this. And you don't really need to enter the sustain game, right? Like, you don't need enough mana regeneration, you don't need enough mana, you don't need enough healing, you don't need any of that stuff. You just need enough HP to get the job done, and the ability to catch a target, and because your DPS is viable enough to explodify them out of existence. That is actually a viability. So up here in this video, let me make this full screen. So up here in this purple area right here is basically like a Reckoning Paladin. I'm literally just recapping this video real fast. Yeah. Which means that you have enough DPS that you don't need to play the sustain game. So ideally, you have enough HP. Think of this resistances more as HP, because this is like a classic World of Warcraft video, right? As long as you can get enough HP and you can catch the target, if your DPS is high enough, you can get the job done. The other way to win, of course, is, let's see, it's a hybrid, breakpoint, the Great Dead Zone. I think we need to flash forward here a little bit. Great Dead Zone, blah, 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 blah. Point sufficient, resist to be unkillable. Right. So the idea, a second breakpoint on your gearing is to win the sustain game. So you can either win via massive amounts of DPS, or and you'll be like a glass cannon type build, or you can be like an unkillable turd and win through sustain, which is a completely different style of combat. However, the way the sustain okay, how do I explain? For the glass cannon build, which was this thing back here, for the glass cannon build, this viable zone, once you hit a certain level of DPS where you're just clapping things out of existence, there's no real point other than helping you with RNG management to getting more and more DPS. You might as well just get more and more durability, because the durability is going to help you with your RNG management. It's going to help you catch your targets, just like we talked about before, and blah, 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 blah. So that's why this is the viable zone for the glass cannon style, and then this is the DPS breakpoint, meaning right around here somewhere you have enough DPS to get the job done. Anything below this point, you don't have enough DPS to get the job done. This is the DPS dead zone. And then anything above here is you're still viable, but there's no point in continuing having this much DPS. You might as well put it into the HP, which is we have over here is resist, but technically it's HP. It's your durability. So think of this as DPS and durability. The exact same thing happens with the durability playstyle, right? If we go too overboard on our durability, we end up with a bunch of negatives. This is the Great Dead Zone of durability up here, right? There's no point to us being this durable. We want to be somewhere around here. We want to be barely killable. Again, I'm just recapping this video. The reason why you want to be barely killable and not there's no fucking way you can kill me is you want the opponent to be thinking the entire time that they have a chance to kill you. You want their brain to be saying to themselves, I've got this guy, I've got this guy, I've got this guy. You want them to be going down past 30% mana, 20% mana, 10% mana, or resources, or all in trying to kill you with their stuns and their nades and all the stuff that they need to survive your counterattack. You want them to think the entire time that they got this in the bag, only to find out that, oh shit, this paladin still has like 200 hit points left or 100 hit points left. I failed. Boom, you heal to full, and the next thing you know, you're going offensive. So if you have too much durability, you're giving the game away. Not only is it useless on you, theoretically, right? Unless you're, but it becomes doubly useless because you're giving the game away to the opponent. You want them to give you their trinkets and their mana and their offensive CDs and all that stuff. You want to give them to give it to you in the form of offense, not trying to overcome that shit with your offense, right? So the durability playstyle is we rope-a-dope our opponent for an extended period of time. We wear them down on resources. We gear we gear just enough durability so that we can guarantee we're going to survive their attentions, but not too much that we're giving the game away, so our opponent doesn't know what the fuck is up. And then we barely survive everything because they'll throw everything in the kitchen sink at you trying to kill you, and then that's your window of opportunity to go offensive. So they'll throw grenades at you, they'll use their trinkets, that they'll use CDs that they need to be defensive against your offense, trying to end the fight right there. It fails, and suddenly your offense is much, much, much more potent because you haven't given the game away until the last minute. And this becomes even more effective when you hit the gearing just right, because they think that we just got lucky. Like I didn't gear to survive an elemental shaman burst with 100 hit points every fucking time. I just got lucky. And that's not what's happening. No, I geared specifically to survive an elemental shaman burst in Classic World of Warcraft precisely with about 100 to 150 hit points. And then I stun the shaman and I start healing myself, and then the shaman's up shit creek without a paddle. No, I geared to not give the game away, if that makes any sense. So basically, where we find this sweet point for our for the durability paladins playstyle, and naturally we sacrifice on once we I'll just continue with the video. Is we do option number 1, and that is we gear to make ourselves literally unkillable as we possibly can, and then we go and we start dueling people with it, even though they're going to hate it. What this does for us is two things. One, it lets us know that we can be unkillable. It lets us know that how much in excess we are unkillable, therefore how much gear we can shave off, especially in certain matchups, and still be unkillable. It helps us identify specifically... Ooh, I don't want none of this. I guess I want this, right? It helps us specifically identify where this is. So our gearing is basically going to be... We're going to start off... Whoa, shut up. We're going to start off with very low DPS, but like massively high durability. And then as we see we don't need all this durability, we'll start bringing the durability down and start pumping up the DPS and the can we catch it, can we kill it? Until, of course, we hit a certain break point in this matchup where it's like, okay, now I'm still unkillable. But if you're wondering why this green bar extends past the point sufficient to be unkillable down here, like why isn't the break point just solidly right here? The answer is RNGesus, right? So if I've geared so that I'm down here, I'm still in the viable point, but I'm not like right at the point of being unkillable. Basically, what this means is like 50% of the time RNG will come through that I survive, and then like 50% of the time RNG will come through that I die, if that makes any sense at all. But I start getting past this black line here, and RNG really isn't a factor anymore. I'm going to survive that elemental shaman's burst with about 100 to 150 HP. Going to happen all the time, every day, all day. Get fucked. Unless they get, like, unbelievably lucky and everything in its dog crits me. Yeah, so we start off up here. We start off with the low DPS and the high durability, and then we just start adjusting, right? So we start bringing this down. We start upping the other things, and that's how you find the durability sustain paladin sweet spot or gearing sweet spot, if that makes any sense. So that's option number 1. Option number 2, and you have to do both. You can't just do one. You have to do both. Even if you're like, I'm only gonna do the sustain style build. I'm not interested in the glass cannon style. It's like, no, you have to do both, and I'll show you why. The other option is go max DPS, like as much DPS as you possibly can, and then pull back on DPS for catch and survive, if that makes any sense. So we're doing the exact opposite. So the exact opposite would be, and this is option number 2, is we come back over here. Yeah. And you'll end up gearing so that you're basically a pure glass cannon. You try to maximize as much of your DPS as possible. You have very low durability, and you just take it into duels, and you see what happens. And in some cases, what you're looking for is does this work? Because if you can end a duel super quickly or end a 1v1 super quickly, that is superior than taking like 2 minutes to end the fight, right? So for example, against Rogue in Classic World of Warcraft, because Rogues cannot trinket a stun, it is perfectly viable for you as like a Reckoning Paladin, for example, to basically be like a pure glass cannon. And when a rogue opens up on you, you just, wait till you have full Reckoning charges. All you need is enough HP so that you're not going to die to get full Reckoning charges. You then like either trinket or bubble the whatever the hell the CC of the rogue. You stun the rogue, and then you you just hit the rogue with Wreck Bomb, and you blow them out of existence, right? That's perfectly viable. The other type of synergy that tends to happen with with large quantities of DPS is you end up getting pressure benefits. You end up putting so much DPS in the form of pressure into your target that your target is forced to react defensively, which allows you to put even more DPS into the target. We experience this as paladins when we end up getting heal locked. So, for example, being heal locked is you experience this a lot if you're fighting like warriors, universally, or if you're fighting another paladin that does more damage than you, right? So, and you also experience this against rogues and other classes to an extent. Damn it. But what a heal lock looks like is, say I'm in I need to drink water. That's why I'm coughing. One sec. Okay. So what a heal lock looks like is, let's say you're fighting a warrior, and the warrior just does more DPS than you. He's got more hit points, and he does more DPS than you. And what this ends up meaning is that you're going to either have to bubble before he does. You're going to have to bubble and start healing yourself, or you're going to be at like 1/3 life trying to get off holy lights, and the warrior's going to be at like half life, right? So you're just stuck there trying to heal after heal after heal, while the enemy class is just DPS after DPS after DPS. And they're throwing interrupts into you and shit like that, and so forth and so on. Sometimes you get heal locked against like spellcasters, right? Like you'll experience that against like warlocks. You'll experience that against shamans, where they're just perfectly free to put offensive attack after offensive attack into you, and you're stuck there trying to counter their offensive attack with a heal over and over and over again. Basically, they've won the pressure war, and they're taking pure advantage of it, right? You're stuck trying to heal yourself. So by exploring the glass cannon playstyle, a lot of times you can put so much pressure on your opponent that they're forced to use their abilities defensively as opposed to offensively, which allows you to put even more DPS in there. DPS begets DPS if you're able to put enough DPS pressure into the target. In some matchups, that of course comes in the form of durability and DPS in conjunction with each other. An amazing example of this is Versa Warrior. Basically, no matter what paladin type you are versus a warrior, you want to wear a shield, because even though it reduces your DPS significantly as a paladin a lot of the time, it completely cucks the warrior on rage, which means they start struggling to win the DPS fight. A DPS fight against a lot of melee classes is a combination of your DPS and your mitigation, just like your raw efficiency in melee played out over time. And if your raw efficiency in melee is better than their raw efficiency in melee, and they don't have, they're going to be the ones that have to go defensive first, which means you get to put more damage into them. It just makes perfect sense, right? I know a lot of paladins are much more familiar with this playstyle than the other playstyle, but it is what it is. So you're going to try to, no matter what paladin you are, you're going to want to explore massive amounts of DPS, like the most DPS possible. And then you're going to start running into issues, right? You're going to see issues in duels of like, oh, I don't have enough HP to survive this duel, and my pressure is useless against this class. Therefore, this build is totally not going to work against this class. Or you're like, oh shit, I don't have the ability to time on target anything. I'm a time on target paladin. I can't stop them from eating and drinking all over the fucking place. My DPS is suffering because I can't stop them from eating and drinking. And then you solve these dilemmas by pulling back on the DPS and then start gearing out differently. More HP, more catch you trinkets, or different uses of grenades, and so forth and so on, right? And this is where you'll start discovering your lines of play, right? Like, what's a good line of play? What's a bad line of play? What is a viable line? Oh yeah, I guess we should talk about lines of play as well. Going max DPS and trying to pull back on the DPS in order to get these other things going on, in order to get the catch and the don't die going. What am I trying to say here? You can find viable lines of play with viable PvP synergies by testing this out, and which is why you have to do it whether or not you want to or not. So, for example, in Classic World of Warcraft, how I discovered that I didn't need resist gear versus warlocks and a bunch of other classes, like Shadow Priests, for example, I could just go pure spell power DPS against those two types of classes, was specifically I did this. I put on as much spell power gear as I possibly could, and I went and I started dueling those classes, and I got my ass kicked. And then I started increasing my, I started adjusting the stats. Like, first I tried taking more resistances, see if that helped. Then I tried taking more HP to see if that helped. Then I tried doing different lines of play to see if that would help. And then eventually I figured out that, oh, if I adjust my line of play and I take this type of trinket, I don't need resist gear anymore. I needed like one piece of resist gear. So rather than running around with like 60 shadow resist, I discovered that if I was running around with like 110 shadow resist, that was all the shadow resist I needed to be able to effectively engage warlocks and shadow priests, and I had maximum DPS at the same time, and that just ended up being a much more effective way. I ended up being a much more scary paladin fighting those classes than if I had something like 180 shadow resist and a lot less DPS, for example. That's how I discovered that, and you just have to go through that whole process. So there are viable lines of plays that you'll discover in here, and you also discover other things and so forth and so on. So that's why this is option number 2. Option number 1 is really good for figuring out your durability thresholds or breakpoints, if that makes any sense. It doesn't do you any good to put on a bunch of gear and go fight like an elemental shaman and then just explode, right? Compared to, I put on a bunch of gear versus an elemental shaman and he just one-shots me out of existence, versus I put on a bunch of gear versus an elemental shaman and I survive his burst every time with like 1,500 hit points, right? I'm overkill in the extreme on surviving the burst with 1,500 hit points, but at least I'm able to see in real time exactly how many hit points I need in order to survive the burst against an elemental shaman. That number being, oh, I need over 5,000 hit points in phase 3, and then I need 5,100, 200 hit points in phase 5, and then I need over 5,300 hit points in phase 6, or effectively thereof. AKA put on an obsidian breastplate, you fucking clown. And what else is there? So that's very useful. The this is another reason why you have to do them both. Even if you're like, I'm going to be the glass cannon paladin, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, you really should put on like some super durable gear on like a private server and just go and start dueling people, because you'll learn two things. You'll learn how much HP you need in order to get the job done, right? And more importantly, you'll start discovering what more HP can do for you as a glass cannon type paladin, if that makes any sense. Specifically, what you start learning is, if you have more HP and you can survive more comfortably X, Y, and Z coming out at the opponent, right? Then suddenly certain options of lines of play become viable. So you end up in this weird situation that what is dictating viable lines of play and not viable lines of play is can you survive it, and then can you survive it, and then can you catch it, and then lastly, can you kill it? Is far lesser dictating what is a viable line of play, for example. So in classic World of Warcraft, if we're blowing a rogue out of existence with just a stun, then can you kill it in a single wreck bomb is very much dictating what is a viable line of play to us. But under the vast majority of circumstances, what is telling us what is a viable line of play and what is not a viable line of play, what we can do and what we cannot do, is going to be our HP level. So what'll often happen is, as a paladin trying to figure out your gear optimization, is you'll have like a bunch of durability gear. You want to play a glass cannon, but you're going to go out with a bunch of durability gear and just see what happens. And you'll start noticing things like, oh, if I just have 5,100 hit points on my glass cannon paladin, suddenly I could be doing this. This becomes a viable line of play. For example, I will survive an elemental shaman's burst, and then I will be able to stun the elemental shaman for 6 seconds, and then I can get off 2 holy lights to heal myself back up to like 70% life, or 80%, about 70% life. This is classic World of Warcraft. If I just meet this gear threshold. And you also might say other things to yourself like, oh shit, I guess I don't need Arena Grandmaster trinket or a Burrower Shell trinket if I get up to 5,100 hit points against an Elemental Shaman. Instead, I can use this trinket or that trinket over here to help catch the target or slow the target or different lines of play, right? So at least you have that in the back of your mind that you could theoretically do that, if that makes any sense at all. And you just start adjusting it from there. So from there, you would be like, okay, I'm going to try to gear so I have like 5,150 hit points, and I'm going to go glass cannon from there, and I'm going to go take that paladin against an elemental shaman. I'm going to see what happens. And you might find out that it sucks a dick because now you don't have enough DPS to get the job done. Or you might find that you're in some gearing sweet spot, which is what that video was all about, and suddenly you're surviving the burst, no problem. They think that they're going to kill you, so they start doing weird shit. But no, you're going to survive the burst, no problem. You're going to heal back up to 70% life, and you're going to start chopping them to fucking pieces. And you might run into some weird synergies where it's like, okay, well, before what I had to do was I was glass cannon. I had to use a burst damage or an absorb trinket like an Arena Grandmaster. I popped the Arena Grandmaster on the way into that elemental shaman. I survived the burst on the back of that off of that trinket usage, and then I'm putting a maximized damage wreck bomb into the elemental shaman. And there's like I'm trying to either kill him or do so much damage that I'm spell locking him so that I can take a bunch of advantages from there. Like, that was your line of play in the past. Whereas your new line of play is, I'm going to survive this burst 100%, right? Then I'm going to get on top of him and I'm going to put a pretty serious wreck bomb into him, but it's not going to be enough to kill him, and it's probably not going to be enough to spell lock the elemental shaman, or to feel him in need to spell lock quite yet. But I now have the space and the freedom to use this stun that I before needed to use offensively in order to force the spell lock. Now I'm going to use this stun, or some shit like that. Now I get to use this stun defensively to heal myself to like 70% life. I still have a trinket usage that I can use like whatever for. I still have, literally, I still have my Arena Grandmaster's trinket, so I can survive the next burst coming out of the Elemental Shaman. 100% guaranteed, no problem. And suddenly you find yourself in a situation where you have a lot more time and a lot more space to just pump DPS into the target. And through raw DPS, not through your burst, will you get them to spell lock, and subsequently you can put more DPS into them. So your line of play has changed, but the outcome is not only identical, but it ends up being performatively superior. So the other line of play, the glass cannon line of play, is I'm forced to use this trinket here and now to try to end the duel before they get off a second burst. I can't survive a second burst, kind of a thing. Whereas now I have enough HP, so it's like, okay, I can totally survive the first burst. I can heal myself up quite nicely. I have this trinket available, so I can survive the second burst. If I survive the second burst, I can still heal myself up quite nicely off of my second Hand of Justice stun, or I still have a bubble to or I don't need that trinket. I just bubble the defensive trinket. I just bubble the second burst, and I heal myself to full off of after the bubble. Yes, the shaman will get distance on me. Yes, he will try to eat and drink and heal to full. But now I have this trinket slot available that I can tell him to go fuck himself. That's not an option. You title charm him and recover the distance, or you gnomish nenomatic him, recover the distance. You nifty stopwatch, recover the distance, and the next thing you know, it's not an RNG equation as to whether or not you're going to win this duel anymore. It's a guaranteed win because you've adjusted the line of play, if that makes any sense. There is synergy to be had between DPS and durability for a paladin. There's also synergy to be had between for very large amounts of burst DPS for a paladin. And then lastly, there is synergy between durability and sustain for a paladin, and how we identify where these breakpoint. And lastly, there's synergy for a paladin in can you fucking catch a thing, right? It's like, go ahead and run, I'll be with you in a second. And usually the way go ahead and run, I'll be with you in a second works is you need to support that with HP. You can't really support go ahead and run, I'll be with you in a second with just raw DPS, right? And how we find these breakpoints is we gear to be as durable as possible, and we just go duel and we see what happens. And then, sometimes I'm switching out HP gear for resist gear, see what that looks like. I'll try a balance between resist gear and HP gear, see what that looks like. Get familiar with the meta and what the other classes can do, what their bursts look like, and so forth and so on. And the other one that I will eventually try is just pure DPS, and I'll try pure DPS and see what that looks like. Am I picking up any synergies just off of massive amounts of DPS, or do I desperately need to have more fucking hit points? If I start getting more hit points, but I keep my DPS as high as possible, what is that looking like? Is there any synergy there for me? Okay, do I still, what happens if I do as much DPS as possible with enough HP that I can't be killed as possible, with as much sustain as possible? What does that look like, kind of a thing? And you just kind of test it all, if that makes any sense. So if you ever wonder why I know so much as I do, I spend hours and hours and hours just testing stuff, if that makes any sense. So anyways, I'm going to end this video here. This video is about stat prioritizing your paladin for PvP. It should be known that in classic TBC and in... Alright, so we got to talk about meta changes before I end the video. The video's probably kind of long, yeah, 42 minutes. So in classic World of Warcraft, the meta is... Let's actually conclude that. Okay. So in classic World of Warcraft, so now we're talking meta. So in classic World of Warcraft, the meta is very bursty, and it is high sustain. Very bursty, high sustain. So classic equals classic meta equals high burst and then slash high sustain. And then we're going to be talking about TBC meta equals low burst, low sustain. All right, so in classic World of Warcraft, okay, so it's high burst, high sustain, low burst, low sustain. Yeah, this is correct. Okay. So in classic World of Warcraft, the meta, and I don't mean meta in the terms of like what the player base dictates the meta is going to be. I'm talking like what Blizzard and their spell power ratios and the gear and the DPS and the abilities and so forth are dictating what the game is going to be. So in classic World of Warcraft, for example, a paladin is about 3 or 4 spell casts from death. If you're not geared properly, your three hard spell casts, as in root your enemy target roots itself in place, and then pumps 3 hard casted spells into you. If you're not geared properly, your 3 spell casts from death, like 3 shadow bolts, 3 frost bolts, a combination of lightning bolts and chain lightnings and earth shocks away from death. Right, 3 fucking spell casts. So maybe like 7.5 seconds worth of spell casting away from death. If you're geared properly with your HP, then you're 4 spell casts away from death. Which is a bit of a difference, but the meta is very high burst, but it's also very high sustain. So, for example, in 2.5 seconds in classic World of Warcraft, I can heal myself with a Holy Light. I can be butt naked. Let's say I could have no plus healing gear whatsoever in classic World of Warcraft, and my Holy Light will heal myself for 40% of my life. So I have over 5,000 hit points. My Holy Lights are healing me for 2,300 or I think it's like 2,100 hit points without any buff whatsoever, right? So that's over 40% of my life. So it's like the situation is that I can lose 5,000 hit points in like 7.5 seconds of spell casting, but I can also heal myself for over 90% of my life, about 90% of my life inside of like 5 seconds, right? And that is the meta in classic World of Warcraft. It's very high burst because you can lose a lot of life very quickly, but you can also heal a lot of life very quickly. The other aspect to sustain is how well can people regenerate their mana over time. And in classic World of Warcraft, there's a bunch of CCs like sheeps and saps and a bunch of other crap in the game, rocket helms and all that shit that allow people to really pull back a metric shit ton of mana off of CC. They can break combat, they can eat and drink, and yada yada yada, right? In TBC, that doesn't really exist. It's much harder for classes to sheep you and then get drinks in, or to CC you and get drinks in, because no CC lasts longer than like 10 seconds. Like a sheep is like 10 seconds, for example, as opposed to being literally an eternity in classic World of Warcraft. So the sustain is much lower from a mana regeneration perspective in TBC, just from an eating and drinking perspective. On top of that, the sustain in TBC is much lower based upon trading spell casts, if that makes any sense. So I go back over here and heal. Yeah, it's not going to work. Control Z. So for example, in TBC, DPS doesn't really increase all that much. Like it increases a bit. Like it increases like 50%. So it's like every class's what the fuck am I trying to say? Every class's HP pool like doubles in the Burning Crusade, but your DPS only increases like maybe 50% at most. Judging by these numbers here, the DPS from like Phase 6 doesn't even increase significantly at all. It increased like maybe 30%, which means that the meta is much less bursty in TBC. than it is in Classic World of Warcraft. 7.5 seconds of spell casting in TBC will get a target down to like half life, as opposed to Classic World of Warcraft, you are literally fucking dead. And on top of this, the healing has been greatly nerfed in order to keep up with this. So my base healing level in TBC is I can heal 25% of my life in 2.5 seconds. Right? 25% of my life, 2.5 seconds, and that's the base healing amount of like a Holy Light. And this makes healing stupidly mana inefficient compared to the Classic World of Warcraft. So in Classic World of Warcraft, I can heal like 43% of my life for like 600 and some or so odd mana. In TBC, I can heal 25% of my life for like 840 mana or some shit like that. And it's like, it only works because it's a low burst meta, therefore the sustain is allowed to be reduced. So the sustain is both less in TBC because our heals are less efficient from a mana perspective. Our heals are less efficient from a tempo perspective, meaning that we can't heal as much of our HP bar anymore in the same space and time. There's also, but other than that, the math kind of checks out the same as Classic World of Warcraft. Like we go over here, we can see that a Frost Mage is going to be blasting me for about 20% of my life every 2.2 seconds with their spellcast, and I can heal 25% of my. I can heal the same amount of healing in about the same amount of time with Holy Light. The problem, of course, is my 2,500 heal is costing me over 800 mana, and this fucking Frostbolt is connecting me for like 330 mana. So this is not a good mana exchange. Even if you factor in like, well, when it crits, you heal more and you get 60% of the mana back, and it's like, nah, this is really bad. So, but the good news is that all the spellcasters run out of mana a lot easier. Shadow Priests run out of mana a lot easier. Mages run out of mana a lot easier. Lightning Shamans, they're pretty mana efficient with their lightning bolts. I don't think they really run out of mana all that much. As you can see here, they're doing a metric shit ton of damage with their lightning bolt, and the mana cost is almost non-existent. So, you can play the sustain game. It's just a different game. So I'm trying to explain how this changes your gearing in TBC to Classic World of Warcraft. So in Classic World of Warcraft, your base healing capability is really high. But it also needs to be really high because we're in an extremely bursty meta, right? So for Paladins in Classic World of Warcraft, we don't have to worry about how much we're healing with our healing spells. We have to worry about do we have enough mana to heal ourselves and run the opposing target out of mana at the same time, if that makes any sense, right? So our concerns aren't to get plus healing gear on our Paladins in Classic World of Warcraft. Our concern is to get enough MP5 and just mana regeneration in general, or just mana efficiency in general, that we can play the sustain game if that's what we're trying to do. In TBC, we have to worry about not only trying to keep as much mana as possible, our mana up, because the mana efficiency of our spells is complete dog shit as far as heals are concerned, but the actual amount healed from those healing spells is also dog shit comparatively. Like, it's literally like the difference between 600 mana to heal 2,100 hit points, or 800 mana to heal 2,500 hit points. But yeah, it's bad. So there's another layer of gearing dilemma that we have in TBC, which really hurts Paladin pretty badly. Yeah, so we still need the hit points. Well, that's not true. So we need less hit points in TBC than we do in Classic World of Warcraft, because we're in a much less bursty meta. So things have shifted from Classic World of Warcraft from HP is king to us needing more efficiency on our heals for sustained paladins, if that makes any sense at all. Which is why in the previous video I brought up, like, you know, Holy Reckoning or Holy Argent Defender or just Holy Paladins in general are so good in classic World of Warcraft. It's because Blizzard fucked up with their, you get to kill two birds with one stone in our gearing dilemma. So let me just write this down here. So our gearing dilemma in TBC as a paladin seems to be as follows. It's like need MP5, like we need enough mana to get the job done. This is if you're doing the sustain style, right? The glass cannon can ignore the need for mana. 2, we need plus healing. We need plus healing, like literally plus healing, because the base efficiency of our healing spells means it's borderline not even worth our time to try to cast a heal spell. Period. End of story. So if I'm healing myself for 2,500 hit points over 2.5 seconds, 25% of my life over 2.5 seconds, and I'm being chewed on by any other class, or they're throwing spells into me, this is not a good exchange. We can go over here and we can very clearly see this is not a good exchange. So I will be heal locked against mages and not mana efficiently heal locked against mages. I will be mana locked or heal locked against shadow priests and not mana efficient in the heal lock versus shadow priests. I'll be I'll be heal locked against lightning bolt shamans, but not mana efficiently either. Definitely not mana efficiently. There's almost there's no point for me to stop and fucking heal myself if I don't have plus healing gear. There's borderline, there's almost no point to it whatsoever. Argent Defender changes the math of this somewhat because you get such a massive damage reduction, which is why we talk about Argent Defender in other videos. Blah, 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 blah. But as a general rule, we need plus healing, parentheses, or our Argent D. Right? Like those, which is the exact same thing as like plus healing gear. Otherwise, there's just no fucking point to cast heal spells whatsoever. The third thing that you need is fucking DPS. No. You need to catch. Catch it. Because if you're not catching it, then the sustain game is non-viable. Right? The sustain game, no matter what magnitude you're using the sustain game to your advantage, whether you're using a little bit of the sustain and you're going heavy on the DPS, or you're using a lot of the sustain and you're going lower on the DPS, if you can't catch it, those motherfuckers are going to go and they're going to drink. And if they start drinking, then this low sustain meta that you exist in, because it's normally difficult for them to go and drink, goes out the window. They're going to completely beat you on the MP5 realm, and it becomes unsustainable. Then the fourth thing that we have to worry about, lastly, is your DPS. Like, do we actually have enough a DPS along with enough healing, along with enough MP5 in order to get the job done? Prioritization in TBC, lastly, would be your HP. Your HP is in Burning Crusade is actually at the bottom of the totem pole for your concern as far as your combat abilities go as a paladin. This is completely different than classic World of Warcraft, where everything is inversed. So this is TBC down here. And if I did classic WoW up here, it literally goes HP is king, your prioritization is HP, and then second prioritization is catch, and then the last prioritization is kill. And the reason why HP is king is because you're in a heavy burst meta, which is a problem. Catching it is more important than killing it, because catching it allows you to play the sustain game, but it's not super... Catch and kill are borderline identical in classic World of Warcraft, because a lot of classes can just get away from you and start drinking, right? And so catching them is not really all that important. You're more in on the kill. Like, think like Hunter, right? Like catching a hunter is important, but when you catch a hunter, you really blah blah. I won't go into details, but primarily in classic World of Warcraft, there's like 3 things to worry about, and then like fourth would be our sustain, MP5 style, right? Our MP5 is the lowest prioritization stat in Classic World of Warcraft. More importantly, it's do we have the HP to not die? Can we catch it? Can we kill it? And then can we sustain? Notice that we don't need plus healing gear because in TBC, it's looking like my HP is my lowest priority stat by far. You still need enough HP just to avoid like being all in killed. So, for example, if you're against a mage and the mage is casting attacks into you, you're keeping your HP up as high as possible. The mage counterspells you, and then you just have to try to not die and survive that counterspell, where the mage is going to do all kinds of shit, nasty shit to you. He's going to cast Frostbolt after Frostbolt, and then he's going to Palm Pyro out another Frostbolt. Particularly if you're rooted in place with the ice shit, so that it increases, they get like Shatter, it increases their critical strike chance. You're going to be bitch slapped by 2 back-to-back Frostbolts, not back-to-back, simultaneous Frostbolts in your fucking face. You need enough HP to survive these all-ins. Same thing goes with a rogue, right? The rogue's going to open on you. You're going to be stunned for a million years. Need enough HP to survive that. Need enough HP to survive whatever I can't do anything bursts. Warlocks are going to fear you. They're going to dot you up. They're going to fear you, and they're going to try to burst you out of existence. Once you come out of that fear, you have to stun their pet, and then only then can you go for a heal. That's assuming they're using a Void Walker. Not a Void Walker, a Fell Hunter. You have to try to go for that heal. The pet is stunned, so he can't interrupt your heal. That's good. But then you're going to take a death coil to the face, interrupting that heal, and you might have time to go for another heal. You might not have time to go for another heal. You shouldn't. You should not have enough time to go for a heal before that Fell Hunter is out of his stun, and that you get the point, right? That the Warlocks have a kill combo that they can affect on you. And you need enough HP to deal with that. However, a lot of your HP to deal with this can just come from your trinkets, right? Like Battle Master trinkets increase your HP temporarily by 1,750 HP. Can be used when can't be used when you're feared, obviously, but it can be used when you're silenced, I imagine. So that's pretty good. Other items like the Vial of the Sunwell can store up to 2,000 on-demand healing. Can probably use that when you're silenced. Can use that against the Warlock, right? Healing potions, all that other stuff. If you have that, yada yada yada. Or if you're a Holy Shock Paladin, you just Holy Shock yourself back up for another 2,000 hit points. If you're an Argent Defender Paladin, you're stunning the target, or you Shadow Reflector that bolt, or you just PvP trinket the Horrify away. But I guess they'll just fear you again. But you got Argent Defender, so you're kind of chilling on the Argent Defender. It's like, yeah. So you need just enough HP that you can survive whatever kind of burst exists in TBC, even though it's a low burst meta. And once you have that number to survive just about any burst, then everything else becomes more important. You don't need any more HP, is what I'm saying. It becomes more important, can you catch it? It becomes more important, are you able to actually heal yourself? Because the default Paladin in TBC does not come with actual fucking in-combat healing ability. And I don't mean like you're going to be interrupted. I mean like you literally, it's pointless for you to even click that fucking Holy Light button because you're just going to be spell locked, run out of mana, and fucking die. This is also kind of why MP5 is like the #1 stat you kind of need. Again, this is for the Sustained Paladin. If you're the Glass Cannon Paladin, then it's like, hey, do I have enough HP to survive the bursts? And then I just need to maximize my DPS, and I need to focus on can I catch it. I'm not paying attention to MP5 or healing. However, if you pull back on the DPS a bit and you start picking up MP5, you'll start noticing some serious benefits because you're able to you can't play a sustain game, but you can start playing a time on target game if you have MP5 in conjunction with DPS and enough HP to get the job done. You can start playing a time on target game, which might improve your lines of play. The Holy Paladins are spectacular in TBC, specifically because just by the act of taking a Holy Paladin, you solve the DPS problem. Like the Holy Paladins and the Holy Gear, they have metric shit tons of DPS, a lot of DPS. You solve to a lesser extent. Your heals become viable, even though they're still not very mana. If they become viable to cast as opposed to being dog shit, which means now that your healing is viable, your HP is much better, but you still need to just hit that threshold of having enough HP to survive whatever burst is in the game. Because your healing is good, the only things you really need to focus on now as a Holy Paladin is, can you catch it, and then do you want to or do you not want to play the sustain game with MP5? Catching it is probably more important if you want to play the sustain game, but it's low on the list because if you took like Holy Shock, for example, right? You're halfway there to solving the can you catch it problem. Because a lot of your DPS is coming from your judgments, a lot of your DPS is coming from your Holy Shock, but more importantly, Holy Shock and Judgment are being used to keep your target in combat, so you don't really need to catch it quite as prioritatively. More importantly, you need the MP5 in order to keep up the healing, in order to keep up the DPS, in order to solve your catch it problem. So we have 5 major issues in TBC as a Paladin, as opposed to 4 major issues in classic World of Warcraft. The sheer act of taking spell power on your Paladin solves specifically the issue of DPS, and it solves the issue of your heals being shit. It does not solve your catch heal, your can you catch it issue innately. It does not solve your mana issue innately, and it does not solve your HP issue innately. However, the Holy Paladins come in 2 types. One takes Argent Defender, and the other one takes Holy Shock. If you're a Holy Shock Paladin, then you're very good on the HP front because you can use Holy Shock to heal yourself. Heal yourself like 20% of your life every 15 seconds instantly. You're better on the catch it department because catching something has 2 components. Component number 1 is, am I physically on top of the target, able to beat the shit out of it? Time on target. We call that time on target, right? Component number 2 is, I can't time on target this guy, but can I stop him from eating and drinking and bandaging and stuff like that, right? Holy Shock solves that problem. So you become like 50% viable in the catch it, and you become significantly more viable in the HP, and you become very viable in the DPS. However, so your primary issues are you still need MP5, right? Which is why the Holy Shock Paladin typically is a monster, and you might need to try to scrounge up enough HP that you can survive the all-in burst because you're a little low on the hit points. The other type of Holy Paladin, again, watch the previous video, is the Argent Defender Paladin. 1 second, I need a drink of water. So the Argent Defender Paladin still has MP5 issues. He half solves the problem of healing just because he can go into Argent Defender mode and gain like an 80% bonus to his healing efficiency, both from an MP5 and a healing perspective. But that's only useful in certain matchups under certain conditions. It's useful against all opposing classes in the 1v1, as long as that class has been worn down into a sustained fight state, if that makes any sense. So if I, again, watch the previous video, if I put on a bunch of like plus healing gear and MP5 gear as an Argent Defender Paladin, and I just refuse to die, like I have no DPS, but I just refuse to die, and I wear my opponent down into a sustained fight state, and then I drop combat and I switch over to the DPS gear to finish off the target, then Argent Defender actually solves in large extent the MP5 problem, and it also solves the healing problem because my enemy, I can go into Argent Defender mode. That means that you fall below 35% life in healing. The only heals you're doing are usually flashes of light that'll heal for like 1,000 hit points, 800 to 1,000 hit points, and you're just relying on the fact that you've got something like a 50% damage reduction to just enhance to fix your healing problem and to fix your MP5 problem. One sec, I gotta go to the bathroom. Okay, we are back. So, what the hell was I talking about? Argent Defender Paladins. Yeah. Sustain, burst. Yeah, I was talking about the difference in the Argent Defender Paladins and why the Holy Power is superior to... It solves all the problems, right? Okay. So Argent Defender is interesting in the sense that you cannot enter Argent Defender mode if your opponent either has the resources... If your opponent has the resources to burst on you before you can take an action. If you can take an action, any action whatsoever, an instant cast, anything, do anything, before their burst can kill you in Argent Defender mode, then you're good. Because your action is going to be like a Battle Master Trinket for like, an extra 1,750 hit points while at a 50% damage reduction. Or it's going to be something like a Whipper Root Tuber for like, 800, 900 hit point heal while at a 50% damage reduction. Or it's going to be like a Health Potion while in Argent Defender mode. Or, and that'll get you... over the hump, or you can like stun the target and get some heals on yourself, or that little bit of extra healing or Sunwell, that trinket usage or whatever will get you over the hump to start being able to heal again, and you'll survive their burst while in Argent Defender mode. By resources, I mean they have the mana and they have the cooldowns, right? So if you've worn down your opponent significantly, Argent Defender mode starts being able to solve the MP5 issue, and it starts being able to solve the healing issue rather significantly. Doesn't really help you in the catch it too terribly much, other than the fact that it makes you have way more effective hit points than you should have. So, for example, a Holy Shock Paladin has about 1,300 effective hit points. That's about 1,100 hit points base, and then you heal yourself with Holy Shock for like 2,000. So he has about 1,300 effective hit points. An Argent Defender Paladin, they're running around with like a 10,000 to 11,000 hit points base, because you had to sacrifice on the HP in order to solve all these other fucking problems, like MP5 and so forth and so on. But your effective hit points is still like 15k just because of all the damage reductions and Argent Defender and blah, 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 blah. So that can kind of help you catch the target, because it means you can run at the target more without having to stop and heal yourself, but, it's not the greatest thing in the world. Argent Defender, the sheer act of taking 5 out of 5 Argent Defender solves your HP problem instantaneously. You could probably be butt naked as an Argent Defender problem and probably still not be burstable. It's kind of... that's not entirely true. Mages can burst out the Argent Defender Paladin that I've noticed. Thank you. It's very nice of you. Fuck off. No, seriously. Fuck off. Mages can burst down the Argent Defender Paladin with that combo of the 2 Frostbolts. So, for example, they'll get me down to like, 37% life, and then just nuke me with 2 Frostbolts that come in. It counts as the same batch, because you have to fall below 35% life before Argent Defender activates. So if you take like 40% damage while at 40% life, Argent Defender mode isn't doing fuck all for you. You're just exploding. There aren't many classes that can pull that off, and I'm pretty sure that... Frost Reflector Trinket right then and there solves that problem, and a Grand Master Trinket for an extra, 1,700, 1,750 hit points right there solves that problem. Health Potion, Whipper Root Tuber, there might be other things I could do to solve that problem right then and there, you know what I mean? Sunwell, Trinket. Even something as simple as like a Burrower Shell from Classic World of Warcraft, or an Arena Grand Master Trinket will just solve that problem. Obsidian Breastplate might actually still be a thing in TBC. Don't quote me on this. but I'm thinking it is just because we're in a low burst, low sustain meta, and Obsidian Breastplate kind of is a pimp, so that might solve the problem. You know, synergizes super well with Argent Defender. Just get enough HP to survive until that Argent Defender activates, and then you're pretty much good to go. So Argent Defender, the sheer act of taking it solves a lot of our problems, but it doesn't solve our MP5 problem. It doesn't solve our healing problem unless we specifically have the ability to go in Argent Defender mode and not fucking die, which in a lot of cases you can, but in a lot of other cases you can't. It also really hurts your DPS to be in Argent Defender mode because you have to stop and heal yourself. It's very stop, start. It hurts your time on target, so issues. Argent Defender mode doesn't, theoretically it helps your DPS because you don't have to heal as much, but it doesn't really work out that way. It both does and doesn't. It's complicated. So Argent Defender mode does a lot to solve the problem, but when you're an Argent Defender Paladin, you still need to pick up MP5, typically. Your DPS, picking up MP5 is going to come at the expense of your DPS. MP5 actually equals DPS for Argent Defender because you don't have Crusader Strike, which means you're doing a lot of seal twisting for your damage bonuses, which means that MP5 ends up being DPS. So MP5 on this Paladin is number 1 because it can be used both for the sustain, the healing, and it can be used for the DPS. Depending upon what you need it for, it is there for you. The Holy Argent Defender Paladin is superior to the Physical Argent Defender Paladin because, again, the sheer act of picking up Holy spell power or plus healing gear starts solving other problems, right? Suddenly our healing becomes more effective, and it even becomes more effective in the Argent D. We're healing less, therefore we can DPS more. Our heals are more efficient, more space for MP5. Our HP was already solid, but now it's like stupidly solid. So it doesn't really help us out there too terribly much. And it helps us out in the DPS. So the Holy Power in TBC just kills 2 birds with 1 stone. It kills the healing issue. It solves the DPS issue. Helps a little bit with the catch it, but not too terribly much. What else is there? That's about it. So what I wanted to bring up was stat prioritization, what it's looking like in TBC. I wanted to talk about the TBC meta, how it is low burst, low sustain, but there are burst things out there that do exist. I wanted to talk about all the gearing dilemmas that we have compared to Classic World of Warcraft. Classic World of Warcraft, it's just HP, and then can you catch it, can you kill it? And then fourthly is, do we have enough MP5 or just raw mana bar in order to get the job done? That's kind of your prioritization for all the classes. In TBC, things are much more interesting and dynamic because not only has the meta changed, but our base healing is no longer viable. It's no longer sufficient like it is in Classic World of Warcraft. So it's just another thing on the bonfire that we need to sadly to deal with in our gearing. This is also why Holy Paladins tend to be Power Paladins tend to be better than physical damage dealing Paladins in TBC, because if I'm a physical damage dealing Paladin, like let's say I'm all in on that, right? I have to give up on healing because I can't take spell power, right? And my healing is just dog shit. It's not worth it from the word go. So I'm all in with whatever HP I have. Suddenly, I'm very susceptible to being bursted out of existence, even in a low burst meta, because I'm super dependent upon what HP I have. So I have to start hitting certain HP thresholds. I have to have like 11,000, 10,000 hit points or something like that. The fact that I need to try to hit these HP thresholds is really hurting. It's more of a talent build issue than the fact that I'm a physical damage dealing paladin, right? So the Argent Defender Paladin, physical damage dealing. His issue is, it's like, well, I can't really heal myself, but I really want to heal myself. I need to seal twist all over the place for my DPS, so I kind of need some MP5. Catching it, I can probably handle that, but I might not have the DPS to really kill stuff. I really just need MP5. You just need a lot of crap as an Argent Defender Paladin, and no one stat that you take on your gear other than Holy Power solves multiple things, right? So if I'm a glass cannon deep ret paladin, for example, I'm not taking really any MP5. I'm all in on whatever mana I have. I'm not doing any healing. I'm all in on my DPS. I can pretty easily catch things because I've got repent, and but really what I need is enough HP to get the job done. But I need as much DPS as possible. I'm all in on the DPS, which means ideally I want to use trinkets that are increasing my DPS and not my HP. I want to use trinkets that are increasing my ability to catch things. I want to use trinkets that are increasing my DPS, not my ability to catch things in the meta. And they're okay, but they just don't quite have enough to get the job done in TBC. They're like a suboptimal build, if that makes any sense. Meanwhile, the fucking spell power paladins are like, okay, I take spell power, and the next thing I know, I have just as much DPS as the physical damage paladins, if not more DPS than the physical damage paladins. That DPS is often like a ranged DPS, which makes it like objectively superior DPS all of a sudden. Suddenly my heals are viable, which means that I can actually take MP5, and if I start taking MP5 with my viable heals, I can actually start playing the sustain game. The sustain game comes online, or hybridizations of that, right? So I become a very flexible paladin all of a sudden. And because my heals are viable, I typically have enough HP to get the job done. Either I'm an Argent Defender paladin, therefore I have enough HP to survive the bursts, or I'm a Holy Shock paladin, so I have enough HP to survive the enemy bursts. And you start being able to take trinkets that rather than surviving the burst or trying to increase my DPS because I'm all in on the DPS, I can start taking trinkets to catch motherfuckers, which really helps the ability to engage in the sustain game and just time on target people into the ground. So it starts killing multiple birds with one stone in the gearing process, and we just end up with greatly superior, objectively superior paladins. That changes, of course, when you go into the arena, but not by much, believe it or not. So when you go into the arena, the glass cannon deep ret paladin becomes super viable, but at the same time, glass cannon any paladin anything becomes super viable. It's just a question of like raw math and raw stats. The Holy Shock Paladins, or the Holy Power Paladins, are also just as viable in the arena, if not more viable in the arena, because they have the option of just winning sustain fights in the arena and picking up like 50% of their wins in the arena, just because they're able to sustain with their partner over time. They'll grind people into pulp. Or what they can do is they actually pump out rather respectable amounts of DPS, so they can double DPS with their partner and win that way, if that makes any sense. So it's like, rather than being a dedicated glass cannon and a dedicated healer, you can go in with like two paladins that are both healers and they're DPSers at the same time, and you'll have a very similar synergy that happens. Anyways, I'm going to end the video here. As long as fuck. I'm Deus Full, boys.